When we hear the word statistics, we usually think of these giant, impersonal numbers, right? Like things about the economy or huge populations. But what if we could use those same tools to tell a story about just one person? What if we could tell a story about you? Well, today, that's exactly what we're going to do. I mean, it's a question we've all wondered about at some point, isn't it? Am I taller than most people? Shorter? Do I run faster or slower than the folks around me? This isn't just random curiosity. At its heart, it's a statistical question. And today, we're going to find a real data-driven answer. So we're going to go on this little research journey together. It's actually inspired by a university statistics assignment, and we're going to use a super simple universal example, human height, to unpack some incredibly powerful ideas that'll show you exactly how to find your own place in any group. All right, so every good statistical story has to start with the data. I mean, you can't really understand a group until you have something to measure, right? So our very first step, just like in any real-world study, is to collect the raw numbers. This is the foundation for everything we're about to do. Now, this might sound super technical, but it really just boils down to three simple things. First, we get the numbers. Second, we find the middle of the group, the center. And third, we figure out how spread out everybody is from that center. That's it. That's the whole game plan. For our little experiment here, let's just imagine we've gone out and collected the heights of 20 different people. Now, in the world of statistics, this small group is what we call a sample. And our whole goal is to use this small sample to understand the bigger story of a much larger group, which we call the population. Okay, first things first, we need to find the center. The mean, which, let's be honest, most of us just call the average, is kind of like the statistical center of gravity. Picture all 20 of our heights sitting on a seesaw. The mean is that one perfect spot where you'd put the pivot to make it balance perfectly. It gives us our first major clue about the group as a whole. Now, let's figure out the group's personality. That's where standard deviation comes in. It tells us just how varied the data is. Is everyone pretty much the same height, all clustered together, or are their heights all over the place? Just think of it as the average step a person in the group takes away from that center point. A small step means the group is really similar. A big step, well, that means the group is super diverse. So we've got our mean and we've got our standard deviation. But, these numbers on their own are pretty much meaningless without some context. To really get what our results are telling us, we have to understand the story of the actual people who gave us this data. This right here is a question every good researcher has to ask. I mean, are these 20 people professional basketball players, or are they a bunch of middle schoolers? Because that answer completely flips how you'd interpret the numbers, right? So the crucial next step is describing our sample. The lab assignment we're pulling from asks these very questions. Were people just chosen at random? Were they all from one city, all the same age? Each answer helps us figure out what population our little sample actually represents. 20 people from a college campus can tell us a story about college students, but maybe not about the entire country. Context, as you can see, is everything. Okay, this is where it gets really, really cool. So we've got these 20 numbers that look totally random. But hidden inside that data is a secret, an amazing, predictable pattern that shows up over and over again all throughout nature. And that pattern is called the normal distribution. You've probably seen it before. It's the famous bell curve. And what it tells us is that for things like height, most people tend to be clumped right around the average. Then, as you move away from the average, you find fewer and fewer people at the extremely tall or extremely short ends. Our little sample of 20 people gives us the clues we need to see what this curve looks like for everyone. And here's the big leap of faith in statistics. The assignment tells us to just assume that the mean and standard deviation we found from our tiny sample of 20 people also apply to the entire population. Essentially, we're using our little snapshot to paint a picture of the whole landscape. So, how do we actually read this hidden pattern? Well, we use this amazing key called the empirical rule. It sounds fancy, but it's a super simple guideline that tells us exactly how our data is spread out along that bell curve. Think of it as our secret decoder ring for the population's data. So here's the first part of the code. The rule says that about 68%, so more than 2/3 of all people, will have a height that's within one of those average steps, one standard deviation of the mean. This is basically the bulk of the average group. Now, if we take 2 average steps away from the mean in either direction, we suddenly capture a whopping 95% of the population. This covers almost everybody, from people who are fairly short to those who are fairly tall. See how predictable this is starting to get? And finally, if we go out 3 of those average steps from the mean, we've now accounted for 99.7% of the population. That's pretty much everyone. This rule just shows us that even in a massive population, there's this elegant, predictable order to how things are distributed. It's amazing. And this brings us all the way back to the beginning. We started with a personal question, and now, finally, we can answer it. We've defined the group, we've found its center, we measured its spread, and we've uncovered the hidden pattern it follows. So now, it's time to put you on that map. And here it is. This is the payoff. Using these simple rules, we could actually calculate the exact percentage of the population that is shorter than you are, and the exact percentage that is taller. That big, abstract question, how average am I, suddenly has a specific, numerical, and very personal answer. So just think about what we did. We took a tiny, manageable sample, just 20 measurements, and by applying a few key statistical ideas, we were able to find a meaningful and personal place for one individual inside a much, much larger crowd. That, right there, is the real power of thinking with data. So we've seen how something like height follows this beautiful, predictable pattern. But what about other things in your life? Your commute time to work, the amount of coffee you drink every day, the number of emails that hit your inbox? The very same principles we used here can unlock patterns all around you. So I'll just leave you with that to think about. Thanks for joining me.